and they're doing work while they're also doing work. They started on Friday and spent all day Friday, yesterday, and they'll spend most of the day today doing some online work, what we call a story workshop. And so they are doing really hard work on their own story. You hear us talk about that a lot here. So they're going to leave us in just a few moments. They won't be here after the service to do the last song, which means I get to sing the last song all by myself, which you will not get to hear. It's funny, Mitchell texted me this week. He said, "Hey, Coy, what's the name of the study coming up?" Like, he just texted to me. And if you don't know, if you've never heard me talk about it, I tend to plan way in advance. I'm that kind of personality. And so I generally know what I'm going to preach on a year in advance. I write down, like, what are the name of the studies and how many weeks long are they going to be and when will they happen. And then I try to stay ahead, writing them by at least 6 to 8 weeks in advance. So I write messages and then preach them 6 to 8 weeks later. And so Mitchell didn't really know what this was going to be about. And so he texted me on Friday, I believe it was, "Hey, what's the name of this study you're about to do?" And I sent him, like, I don't know, LOL, "Are you ready for this?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure. It's something you're probably going to want to post on social media." And so you're going to have to wait to find out as I work through this sermon what I'm talking about. Because today what I'm going to do with my sermon is I'm going to ask a disruptive question. It's going to disrupt things a little bit, and I'm not going to give it to you right now. But the reason why I want to do this couple weeks of study is because, I realized growing up in the church that the church really struggled to talk about hard things. Like, how do we talk about things that everybody wants to talk about, but we don't know how to talk about them because we're terrified if we talk about them, what's going to happen? I am so curious what's going through your minds right now, what subject you think I'm going to preach on. But to me, I was reflecting on where we're headed in a year, and oftentimes there are subjects that pastors and churches will hit, and this will be one of those. But I'm pretty sure this will come from an angle that you're not used to. And what I'm hoping is, as I work through this message today, it puts out there in the open the ability for here at Somos Church for us to talk about things in a way that truly brings some growth in our lives. So this question that I'm going to ask, it's going to disrupt a pattern. And the pattern that it's going to disrupt is a pattern that hasn't served the church very well. And when I talk about the church, I'm talking about the Big C church, not just Somos Church, but the church all around the world. My daughter's friend, she goes to a Catholic church. And, growing up where I grew up, in an area where we had one Catholic church, everybody who wasn't Catholic thought that Catholics weren't Christians. And I'm just here today to tell you that they are, that you are not better than them and they are not better than you. We all follow the same God and Jesus and believe in the same things. And you can argue with other denominations, but we were with her this weekend and we were talking about some things and just working through some things. But they're a part of the church, the big church, all denominations. Every church that follows Jesus is the church. And what I've realized is that every church, whether it's the one I go to or not, is full of people just like you guys. People who want the spiritual part of themselves to experience healthy growth. I'm convinced that's why people go to church. You go to church looking for what you're looking for in church. It may be really loud music so that you can't hear yourself sing or anybody else next to you. You may like that. You may go to a church where they sing hymns and everybody's voice is being blasted in the room and you get to hear it as one big chorus. You may be the person who, when you go to church, you don't want to sing at all. So we don't even have instruments and we just show up and we do it as quietly as we can do it. I don't know. But the Big C church is full of people just like you. And what everybody's looking for is, how do I grow in my faith? How do I experience something that gives me hope? Not just hope for me, but hope for the people around me. I want to disrupt a pattern. And this pattern that I want to disrupt is a pattern that leads people to feel contempt. It's contempt that's felt for the church. I don't know how many friends you have. When they hear the word church, they're like, no, not going to go. I'll never step foot back in a place like that again. I never have and I never will. I've had my own hurts in those places and I'm not going to get hurt again. There are people who feel not positive about church, but negative about church. And often what I have found is that when people feel contempt for something, anything, a person, an organization, or let's just say church, when they feel contempt for it, they associate it with something bigger. And when people feel contempt for the church, they also feel it for God. So if you don't have a good relationship with the church, most people then don't have a good relationship with God. Is kind of how it works. And so, as you can tell, I am a pastor, not by the way I dress, but by the fact that I have a microphone in my hand, and I've been doing this for the last almost 10 years here at Somos Church and another church here in town for about 5 to 6 to 7 years. I have been doing church work for over 20 years. And in those 20 years, like, every job that I've had has been serving with, and for the church. And so if there's anybody in this room who believes this statement, it's me. It's that I believe the church is meant to do a lot of good in this world. And I really hope that people will get involved in it. However, I also want you to hear this, at least from me, that my primary calling as a pastor is not to build an institution. Like, my core commitment as a leader of an organization like this called the church isn't to making sure the church is the best church around. My primary calling is to open my own heart to the restorative work that God wants to do in my life and in my story, so that in what happens in and through me, it gives a vision to other people about how restoration can take place in their own lives. So to say it really simply, my labor is not convincing people to fall in love with an organization. My work, my labor, what I do, I am here to help people fall in love with a God who has already fallen in love with them. And so that's what I do every single week. I do my very best to show up to story groups and to story seminars and to come to the service and everything else that we do here in order to allow God to shape me so that hopefully God can shape you. And I've said it before if you've come to church here, and I will say it again many, many times. We are made, we are created, we are crafted by God as human beings to experience what the Bible describes as shalom. It's a Hebrew term. And shalom is the expression in this world of care, of goodness, and of provision. And so if you learn anything from me today, maybe it would be this, is that we are not meant to live and exist outside of an experience and a reality of what the Bible refers to as shalom, including in the church. Like, God's design for the church is for the church to bring shalom to you and bring shalom to others. Like, in your experience of church, you are meant to touch and to get a glimpse of our relationship with God. Church is meant to give you a taste of goodness as you engage with and are engaged by the church. What this means is God's design for church is for the church to be a people who have the capacity to bring you to life through an expression of God's loving kindness. In other words, how you experience church is intended by God to be activating. It's meant to move you toward what's beautiful and renewing, drawing your soul toward flourishing. That is the point of church. But here's the reality. Sometimes church falls short. I don't know if any of you in the room, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I think there's many of us in this room who could say there have been moments when the church fell short for me. Like, it fell short. It fell short of operating out of a place of goodness. And when the church fails to operate out of a place of goodness, then what it offers to people is a distorted view of shalom. Rather than move people to a place where they have faith, hope, and love, they get steered and stirred in the direction of distrust, anger, and contempt, which can happen often whenever church leaders and church pastors are dealing with the issue of finances. Which brings me to a disruptive question. Are you all ready for this? Why does the church ask for money? Does anybody feel uncomfortable with me asking that question? Why does the church ask for money? And how do I feel about it? That's what I want to talk about today. Why in the world does the church ask for money? And how do I feel about it? Now, most people are going to determine how they feel about it based on two different kinds of answers that are provided to that question. And so I want to name those two answers. One way to answer that question is that the church asks for money as a form of consumption for the benefit of itself. Those would be the kind of church leaders and pastors where they have a private jet. like what in the world does a pastor need a private jet? Somebody needs to help me understand. I don't know if you've all seen that episode on one of the talk TV preachers and pastors who he talked about why he needed a private jet. He needed a private jet because there are people who carry demons with them on the airplanes, he says, and that it's not safe for him to be on the airplane. I'm just wondering, what about the rest of us? Like, what about the rest of us? Like, we're allowed to get on the airplane with all the demons that are floating around, but you don't have to. And that's because, in his opinion, he has to be the one to take the gospel to all the other places of the world. He just doesn't tell us that he takes it with him when he goes to the brothel to get their services. That's the problem that I have with some of the ways that our leaders have dealt with finances. Like, hey, give me your money so I can experience more things in this world. Things that I tell you you're not allowed to mess with, but I get to because it's done in secret. That's one way to answer the question. The church asks for your money to make itself rich. A second way to answer that question is that the church asks for money as a way to have the resources to create an oasis of God's presence in this world for the benefit of you and everybody around you. Do you see the difference? One reason why the church asks for money is to build its own empire, and the other reason to ask for your money is to build God's presence right here on this earth. Now, I feel like I've said some heavy stuff, and we all need a breather for a second. Like, I feel like I need to calm down. I'm a little bit worked up. I was reading recently in one of the books that I'm working through that the animals will literally shake things off. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before. I think of it like when you give a dog a bath and it like shakes all the water off of its body. Well, what I learned is that when certain animals go through intense experiences, they will shake out the stress through all the extremities of their bodies. And in my message, I wrote, like, to show you what that looks like, but I just can't do it today. So if you could imagine me shaking out all of my body, all the stress that I feel with this message I'm about to give to you, then you would understand I need a deep breath because we're talking about something difficult. What we're talking about is, why does the church ask for money? And so today what I want to do is I want to offer you a reason why based on the perspective of a story in the book of Exodus. And I promise you it's not about tithing. And to understand this story in the book of Exodus, we need some context. And to get some context, we have to remember a bit of the details. So if you go back to the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible, you will find this character whose name is Abram. His name gets changed to Abraham. And God makes a promise to Abraham, and God says to Abraham, hey, I want you to leave your land, which is a big deal. I don't know if any of you have a house that you love, that you've lived in for a long time, and if somebody said you need to move out of that house, you'd be like, no, I'm not moving out of this house because it holds too much memory. Like, this is the place where I live. This is home. Others of you are like, please tell me I have to move out of my house into a nicer one, please. But to leave your homeland as early as this story was told was to make yourself vulnerable to the world around you. They knew where they belonged, and they belonged in that place. And God says to Abraham, I want you to leave your land and go to a new land that I will show you. A new land where I will bless you and your family and all the other families of the earth. And Abraham leaves his home. And everything seems to be going okay until his people and himself and his family is taken captive by the king of Egypt, who holds them in this place of servanthood for hundreds of years. And the people are tired of living under oppression. So Abraham's people cry out for God to rescue them. And God does. And how God does it is God chooses this very important character whose name is Moses, who is actually a part of the people of God, but somehow has ended up being raised by the king of Egypt and his family. God chooses him, Moses, and says, I want you to be the one to go to my people and tell them that they're going to be given a land. And you're going to lead them to that land. And then all of a sudden, this thing starts to happen in really dramatic fashion, which includes plagues and the parting of a sea. Moses leads the people into their freedom. And it also starts a 40-year-long journey. I have run marathons. You've heard me talk about it. Marathons with my buddy and I takes about 3.5 hours. That is a long time to be moving somewhere. These people go on the move for 40 years toward this land that God has promised them. 40 years. And it could have been so much shorter if only they had trusted the guidance and protection of God. By the time we get to Exodus chapter 32, the people have been wandering in the wilderness for decades. Like, where is this land? You know, most of us in Florida have been to Disney World. And if you've ever gone to Disney World and don't know where something is, it can take you all day to find it. Like, how do I get to where I can find some kind of certain food that I'm really wanting? Like, how do I get to the ice cream that tastes like pineapple and now they have all kinds of other flavors? How do I get to it? Like, how do I go find the thing that everybody's been talking about, this special cinnamon roll that you can only find at Disney World that is just frozen and put into a warm space at some point out of a package? How do I find it? And these people are looking for something they want to find, and they're looking for it for 40 years. And along this journey, they're like, hey, God, where are you? We need water. And remember, it tells us that, like, water comes out of a rock. Like, that's part of the story. And then they're hungry. They're like, where are you, God? We're hungry. And then manna ends up appearing on the ground, and they have food. Like, they're going on this journey, and they're out in the wilderness, and they are barely surviving. And they're like, God, where are you? And so they end up in this place where Moses, their leader, gets to experience the presence of God on the top of this mount called Sinai. And so Moses goes up and meets with God and comes back down and tells the people, we're going to be okay because God's with us, because I just met with God. And when he comes down, they know he's met with God because of this globe that's on his face, and they believe it. And they're like, okay, we're okay because God's with us, because Moses gets to go be with God and we can't, but at least we know Moses gets to be with God. And Moses brings them all of this instruction. Well, one day when Moses is in the presence of God at the top of Mount Sinai, the people make a really interesting choice. They decide, while Moses gets to see God and be in the presence of God, they also should get that opportunity. And so they bring all of their gold and they give it to Aaron. Aaron gets to replace Moses while he's away up on the mountain having a moment with God. They bring their gold to Aaron and they say, Aaron, we want you to make us an idol. That would be like you all coming and talking to Mitchell or Lonnie or Tori or JC or Bianca or Brooklyn or Tori, or hopefully I didn't miss somebody's name, Shirley, and being like, hey, while Koi's away, can you do something that he wouldn't want us to do? Some of you have tried that before, but our staff would not let you do it. And so Moses is up there having this moment with God, and the people are like, Aaron, will you make us something? And they bring their gold. Gold is precious. It's important. It's something they've been carrying with them. It's valuable. They don't have a lot of it. They bring it to Aaron. They're like, Aaron, make us something. And Aaron actually does it. He takes their gold, and it says that he molds it into a shape of a golden calf, and then he gives it to them. And it says when he gives it to them, he tells them a lie. He says, these golden calf that I've made for you, these are the gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Such an interesting story, that while Moses is in the presence of God and they feel like they're in the absence of God, they make their own. In response to the people's decision of doing this, God tells Moses in chapter 33, verse 1, leave this place. Now, does that not sound like what God told Abraham? Leave this place and take the people with you to the land I swore to Abraham. Then God said to Moses, I will go with you and I will give you rest. In response, Moses says back to God, if your presence will not go, do not carry us up from here. Then in chapter 34, verse 9, Moses prays, let the Lord go with us, please. And then in Exodus 35, we learn about the building of a tabernacle that becomes a place of awareness that God's presence goes with them. Are you hearing how important it is for them to know that God's presence is with them? They are on an incredibly important journey. They're terrified. They're afraid. They're vulnerable. They know they want to get to this place. They know they have to get to the promise that God has provided to them. They're just not sure they know how to get there without God's presence. What I want to do for just a moment is I want to read to you a portion of this story as it's given to us in Exodus 35, starting with verse 4. I want you to hear some of these words. There are some key words that I'm going to point out for you to help you make sense of why I'm asking this really disruptive question today. In verse 4, it says, Moses said to all the congregation of the Israelites, "This is the thing that the Lord has commanded. Take from among you an offering to the Lord. Let whoever is of a generous heart bring the Lord's offering, gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, and fine leather, acacia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and the fragrant for incense, and onyx stones and gems to be set in the ephod and the breastplate." Can you imagine if you all brought stuff like that to offering? We like, where are you going to put it all? Somebody brought me an offering of Conn's potato chips today, by the way, after I told you all not to do that for me last week. In verse 10, it says, "All who are skillful among you shall come and make all that the Lord has commanded, the tabernacle." So God commands them, if you have a generous heart, bring what you have, and everything you have, we're going to use to make a tabernacle. Then in verse 20, this is what it says. "Then all the congregation of the Israelites withdrew from the presence of Moses, and they came, everyone whose heart was stirred, and everyone whose spirit was willing, and brought the Lord's offering to be used for the tent of meeting, and for all its service, and for the sacred vestments." In this story that I've just read to you, there is a repeated mention of the phrase, "a generous heart." In verse 5, it says, "Let whoever is of a generous heart bring the Lord's offering." Then in verse 21, it says, "Everyone whose heart was stirred and everyone whose heart was willing, they brought the Lord's offering to be used for the tent of meeting." That's the tabernacle. So from this, there's something important for us to notice. It's a link between stirring and being generous or willing. Their hearts are stirred, it says, to be generous, which brings up the question, but stirred by what? Like if their hearts are stirred, what is stirring their hearts? And the answer, I believe, is found in their stubborn act of making a golden calf. These are traumatized people living in between the harm of oppression and the safety of the promise of their own land possession. They have left the place of heartache, but they have not yet settled into a place of security. They are living in a state of restlessness. How can you rest when you have to be hyper aware of all the dangers in the wilderness? And if you can't rest, how is it possible for you to experience anything close to restoration? And if they can't experience restoration, then what in the world are they doing? The answer is God's presence. They need God to be with them. And when it seems that God is absent, they seek to make their own God. The people are stirred to give gold to make a false god because they need God's presence. Do you all see that in the story? It's that same need that stirs their hearts to be willing to give their offering for the tabernacle. They are stirred by God's promise of God's presence. It's a presence that will go with them in a way that offers them rest on their journey to their restoration. So, why does the church ask for money? It shouldn't be asking you to give money to dry up your resources, to supply its own abundance. The church in asking for money is meant to stir your heart to be generous toward providing an oasis of God's presence in our world so that you also can find rest on your own journey toward restoration, which shapes you into someone who can co-create with God the same for others. So in closing, what I want to ask is, how do you feel about the church asking for money? And would it change if you could trust that whatever money you give to the church, they will invest in creating a place where the presence of God can be felt, and felt in a way that gives you the rest that you need as you journey toward what God wants to do in your life and your heart? So I'm not going to end by asking you money today. And I won't even end next week by asking you for money. I'm really asking you, are you stirred for the presence of God? Something that I like about the New Testament as we follow the story from the beginning in Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. Those are the first 5 books of the Bible we call the Pentateuch. Those are important books. Like, you really can't understand the story of God without going back into those 5 books. And they're not all fun to read. There's a lot of things that happen and you're like, I don't understand what I'm reading. And that's why we send people to seminary to try to figure out some of those things. But what I like about the New Testament is it takes this concept of the tabernacle, which is really just a reference back to the garden. You all know the story of the Garden of Eden. That's the creation story where God makes this place, and in this place, everything is as it should be. Nothing is broken. There is no heartache. Nobody experiences harm. Nobody gets to hurt you. You don't get to hurt anybody else. Everything that exists is in its purest form. If you take something to eat, it tastes like it should rather than chemicals. Like, it is the reality that we all wish we could get to, where your mom and your dad are the perfect mom and dad. It's where your kids are the perfect kids they should be. It's where we don't have to work for the work of labor. We get to work to make things better in this world. Like, the garden is the place from the moment that Adam and Eve were removed from it that we all have been trying to get back to, which is the enduring presence of God. Knowing that in the garden, in the presence of God, all is okay. And then the tabernacle becomes like a garden. As the people are passing through these places, this terrain, these circumstances that are dangerous, God gives them a little garden in the midst of all that, saying, hey, right here with us in the tabernacle, we know we're going to be okay because God's presence is with us. What I like about the New Testament is it takes the idea of the garden and the tabernacle, and then after that, the temple, and makes it about you. Because in the Bible, when we get to the New Testament, it talks about that your body is the temple. And most people in church history have tried to use that against you as a negative, like, hey, your body's a temple, so don't eat Conn's potato chips because your body is so important you can't put bad things into it. And your body is a temple, so make sure that you only watch Christian TV because you cannot take into your body anything but the weird stuff that they put on Christian TV. Like, that's the only thing. And churches and pastors have misunderstood that this idea of the temple being, like your body being the temple of God, is actually like the most amazing thing that we can learn about ourselves as human beings as we exist here today. Because what he's saying is your body as the temple of God is the place where God's presence resides. Meaning, we don't have to have a garden anymore. We don't have to have a temple anymore. We don't have to have a synagogue. God exists in you. And so what's powerful about the church today is a bunch of temples of people showing up who represent the presence of God. And so I'm wondering, are you stirred to want to experience the presence of God? And why wouldn't you want to experience it with as many people as you possibly can who are bringing it to a room once a week to say, hey, we're in this together? As we close today, I'm just curious. Will you let your heart be stirred? Not just when the church asks for money, but every moment to come back to a place where you know there are people here who will show up, and to me, they will be the face of God. And if your heart can be stirred for that, why would you ever want the church to not exist? Stand with me. Let's pray. A disruptive question, God, is what I've asked. Everybody here today wants to know that you are with us, not absent from us. We can go out and we can find it in nature. A lot of us love to see your imprint in nature. We can experience it in other ways in the world around us. I mean, you created this place, and it has your fingerprint on it. But God, throughout history, there's nothing that compares to the bringing together of your people. None of us are meant to walk through our own wilderness on the journey to our own restoration alone, and that's why you've always kept us together, saying, hey, hold each other up, carry one another, call one another, move one another, bring each other to life. Be the one who sets another person into a place where they realize, I've got to keep moving because there's something out there in front of me that's better. And so today, God, as we think about a tough, hard question, we will allow it to be something that stirs our hearts to say, God, where are you? And will you be here among us? So that together we can embody your presence in a way that brings that presence to a world that is desperate to know what it means to be loved and be cared and supported by you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, I told you we do not have a song after the service today, but we do have one opportunity for you to participate with us before you leave. If you've never been to our church today, then this might be new for you, but you've been around for a while. You know that we have a partnership with 3 different schools here in town, one just a mile away, 2 middle schools that we've been connected to for the past several years. One thing that we do is we write letters for those who have said we'd love to get some encouragement